Bob Moffett,
Here.
Russell Berner,
Here.
Brad Belt,
Here.
Dr. Michael Hennefelder,
Here.
and Joe Wilson. He's here, and I'm here. Thank you.
Our public hearing is for two ordinances, 2023-10 and 2023-11. Read them. We're now open for public comment.
You want
Talk
me to go
about
through an overview?
2023-10 first, I suppose. John?
Yes.
Yeah. I have a presentation. Petra, you just put these slides up on it. So the first case that's before you is a comprehensive plan amendment. The comprehensive plan amendment is being proposed for a future land use amendment. This particular application was notified and meets all the requirements for Freedom of Information Act and our town ordinances. This particular request is a request to change the current designation of commercial to active recreation. It's right here from the,
I've got podium going to it, it's not there.
nothing.
Can you put them online?
I'm connected.
Okay. How about the preferences in the display, or can you put them on my computer so I can display?
I have no audio, by the way.
Can
We're
you-
not saying
can you-
anything right now.
Okay.
Nobody's talking.
I
Okay,
think I can
thank you.
continue. I just wanted to at least get the maps up by the time I get to the portion, so I can help orient everyone. But today's particular request for the application ACP 23-000001, this is amendment to the future land use map. This is particular application in Knight Heron Park, specifically the TMS number 20906000344. And that request is being proposed from the commercial designation to active recreation and open space. The future land use is intended to provide guidance for location and types of proposed future land uses to support the town of Kiawah Island's land use and planning and zoning ordinance. The aspects of the land use and planning element does establish flexible yet predictable methods for determining appropriateness of proposed developments, and that's for the future of the town. Today's applicant is Knight Heron Park Company. This is more commonly known as Kiawah Island Golf Resort. The property size is approximately 1.8 acres, and the current future land use designation is commercial. Today, that current property houses the Kiawah Island Golf Resort. It's the Nature Center, and that building sits within the greater operations of Knight Heron Park, which is adjacent to the subject property. That includes also pool, recreation fields, fitness center, and the Nest Cafe and Market. Within your materials, you do have an aerial photo that outlines the subject parcel. I'm on slide 7, Petra. The first one, first case. So the area in blue shows the subject properties area of Night Heron Park. Next slide. I'm going to just go through a series of images. This is sort of the rear to the property approaching the nature center. The images to the left is the bridge that connects over the lagoon, and the images to the top right and bottom right are looking adjacent to that existing pond. Next slide. Here it continues more images of the nature center. One shows where guests sort of back house, kind of a back house operation is where bike rentals occur. And then the right image to the top, sort of the main entrance to the nature center that's connected to the existing boardwalk that connects the pool and sort of all of the amenities there. Those bottom images are the approach to that boardwalk connection. Next slide. These are continued images of Night Heron Park, the boardwalk. There are existing structures here for the fitness center, the pool area, pool bath. These are all interconnected through this boardwalk. And continue, next slide. Here are greater images more so in the Night Heron Park greater area. This includes images of the nest, recently constructed. The bottom image to the left is temporary use for operations for the Key Island Golf Resort, for the Nature Center and activities, while future plans for construction occur for the proposed development. On the right, you can see that Night Heron Park is greater use for recreation activity. Next slide. Continued more recreational use of the greater park, existing basketball courts and playground areas. Next slide. As stated, the comprehensive defines this area as commercial, and that this category is intended to promote planned small-scale commercial activity, including specialty businesses, personal services, and family restaurants. Such facilities are defining character, and our ideal commercial designation for the town has been identified as Freshfields Retail Village. Next slide. The comprehensive plan and our future land use designation, looking at the subject property to the north, is active recreation and open space. The future land use designation for the adjacent properties in the area are residential, high-density residential, and this would include Mariner's Watch and Windswept Villas. And then across Sea Forest Drive, as you approach Night Heron Park, on the right, those are Night Heron cottages, and those are designated medium-density residential. Continuing, the proposed designation for the property is active recreation and open space. This category provides and intends to promote the development of community parks and recreational facilities. That would include parks, golf courses, and tennis courts. This category also provides for lands that are intended to remain in open space in its natural state. That also includes conservation easements or publicly or privately owned. What's been identified in our comprehensive plan is active recreation and open space designations. Night Heron Park falls under that category as one of the typical developments. Next slide. Here is the future land use map designation as it exists today. The area in red is the subject property in question, and that request is being actually go from that red color, which is commercial designation, to the bright green color, which is active recreation and open space. You can see to the south, the orange color is the high-density residential, which sits adjacent to the property, sort of to the east and south. And then to the north is the greater Night Heron Park. To the west. The yellow color is the medium-density residential area or Night Heron cottages. Next slide. So the Planning Commission has heard this recommendation last month, and they have recommended approval unanimously by a vote of 7-0. And so based on those actions, this comes before Town Council as a recommendation of approval. Staff has outlined, based on the applicant's criteria, their proposal that it is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Next slide. Within the applicant's materials, they have also stated that they find it aligned with the original intent of Night Heron Park for the future proposed resort amenity, and they find that it is established consistent with the town's growth policies and applicable comprehensive plan objectives. Next slide. Based on the consideration, staff has outlined these factors and stating that it is consistent with the comprehensive plan, noting that the specific future proposed development would need to go through the site plan review approval process. The future land use designation does reduce essentially the future intensity based on commercial to parks and recreation and open space. And this does solve a need of a very irregular shaped parcel boundary. Looking at the property history, this parcel was, I'm gonna use the word gerrymandered around an old land use resort restaurant, and so that's why the odd shape there really restricts redevelopment of this property. And so, in staff's opinion, the ability to rezone this particular property allows for this now property to be reconfigured for redevelopment. And I would also note that this does sit in the greater Night Heron Park centralized location for recreational activity. Next slide. So as stated, this does come before you as a recommend of approval from the Planning Commission by a vote of 7-0. And that's the first amendment, so I can pause there and ask if there are any public comments. Sure. The second application is essentially the sister to the first, which is the actual rezoning of the property. This looks at our actual zoning map. Next slide. As stated, the public hearing scheduled for today, Planning Commission heard this on June 7th, and it was properly noticed based on requirements of FOIA and our town code. Next slide. The subject property is a request to rezone this particular property, the same TMS number 20906000344, from commercial zoning district to parks and recreation. Subject property is approximately 1.8 acres in size. Next slide. The property owner remains Night Heron Park Company, and the subject property currently houses the Kiawah Island Golf Resort Nature Center, as stated in the previous comprehensive plan amendment request. This building does sit within the greater operations of Night Heron Park, which is adjacent to subject property, including the area pool, recreation fields, fitness center, and the Nest. Next slide. Here before you now is a picture of the zoning map. Similarly, in the red color is the subject property in hand. That is our town's commercial designation. You can see that the irregular shape of the parcel sits adjacent to the greater Night Heron Park to the south, to the north. Adjacently to the south, in the orange color, is our highest residential density category, which is R3. The properties across Seaforest Drive to the west are Night Heron Cottages, and those are zone R2O, which is our our residential 2 overlay zoning district, which matters to the medium density within our comprehensive plan. Next slide. Here's an aerial image which you've seen, which captures the subject property. It abuts Seaforest Drive to the south, and the L-shaped parcel crosses over the lagoon into the greater activity sort of central area of Night Heron Park. Next slide. I'm just going to roll through all the images, which are essentially the same. So Patrick, you can flip through all of the images there. So you get to the zoning map. Just want to point out one thing here, that the subject property as commercial the same comments would apply based on the interpretation of this being within a greater context of Night Heron Park and its current operations. Next slide. I did include within your materials the current standards for commercial zoning district, which is today. These standards reflect what the setbacks are, the height requirements for the commercial zoning district. The existing uses that are on the property were done in the early 80s. So this property has been set yet since to be redeveloped at the appropriate time now as what has been identified sort of as phase 2 of Night Heron Park. The first phase would have been as more commonly known as the Nest, being the first phase of redevelopment occurring as one of the resort's amenities. Their future plans for redevelopment of the Nature Center would fall in this phase 2. Continue next slide. Parks and Recreation Zoning District. Similarly, the setbacks and standards are outlined to show just a comparison between commercial and the Parks and Recreational Zoning District. The Parks and Recreational Zoning District captures the greater Night Heron Park. So all of the uses today that are currently where the Nest exists, the Nature Center, I'm sorry, not the Nature Center, but the greater recreational area fields all fall under this Parks and Recreational Zoning District. Next slide. This zoning ordinance map amendment does come before you as a recommendation from the Planning Commission based on our ordinance. That recommendation comes to you for consideration for first reading after the public hearing. Continuing, next slide. The applicant has outlined in their approval criteria based on section 12-158, criteria 6 of the reasons why the application should be considered approved based on staff findings. Next slide. You've outlined similarly the same notations presented for the comprehensive plan map amendment request, in stating that the proposed development will need to go through the approved site plan review approval process. The rezoning process sets the stage for that. This does provide an opportunity to correct an issue based on the boundaries of a significantly challenged parcel, it being irregularly shaped, and then the future land use destination would marry to the greater Night Heron Park for consistency of operations there based on the zoning designations, and would limit the intensity of future land uses that could occur within the commercial zoning designation within the Night Heron Park. Next slide. That's sort of a summary of all the questions, all of the applicant's materials regarding the rezoning requests. Just a final note that this does come before you from Planning Commission recommendation by a vote of 7-0, recommending approval. I'll guess turn it for public comment if there are any.
Excuse me. Could I have a motion to officially go into public hearing?
So moved. Second.
Okay. We could take both. Okay, so we'll take both of these at the same time. Are there any comments? It should be noted that we received a letter, 2 letters, and they were attached in the packet for the record.
Correct.
No comments.
Were those included?
Yes, they're at the end of
Oh, the last page.
before the-
Oh, you're right.
Okay, could I have a motion to,
I'll move that we come out of public hearing.
is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.